Howdy, hey, hello, it's McKenna, and this is Munch and Mingle. We've got another 5:30 a.m. recording that is coming to you, which means the voice is still trying to catch up with the rest of my body. So I apologize beforehand, and hopefully it will catch up because, y'all, we've got a lot to talk about today. So please get cozy, get comfortable. This is an incredible talk. Today we are going to be going over Elder Rasband's talk, which is titled The Family Proclamation, Words from God. And honestly, this one's for the girls. Okay, it's also for the guys, but you'll see what I mean. This is just so good for all the girls out there to hear. This is going to also be what I hope a deep in thought-provoking episode, meaning I really hope you can hear and feel what the Spirit wants you to hear today as we go through this. Because as I went through Elder Rasband's talk, I got off on another huge sub-thought that changed the whole way I looked at and heard this talk, just like last week in Elder Uchtdorf's talk. So I'm really excited to get into this. But before we do, just like always, we got to go through a biography. And this one was pretty long, and I'm not going to lie, really hard to choose what to say about Elder Rasband because there was just so many gold nuggets. So I will be linking the whole biography below, and I highly recommend you guys go and read this. So here's the things that I felt stuck out the most to me. Elder Rasband's parents, his mother, Verda Anderson, and his dad, Rulon Hawkins Rasband, had, from what I gather, 4 children, but Elder Rasband was the only child of his parents' union because both of his parents had been married and divorced. He was born February 6, 1951 in Salt Lake. Shout out, it's also my grandpa's birthday. Right out the gate, Elder Rasband in this bio talks about his parents and says, "My father taught me what work is by his example, and my mother taught me about work by having me do it." And I'm just like, yeah, that's an awesome one-liner. Ron's father drove a bread delivery truck, arriving daily by 4 a.m. and returning home late each night. His mother stayed home to raise the children, supplementing the family income by making and selling porcelain lace dolls. Really cool. But the next story is so cute. Ron was assigned to mow the lawn, as his sister recalls, but said Ron is like Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer. He had a way of persuading his friends to help. So she would look outside and there would be his best friend mowing the lawn for him. And the next week it was another one of his friends mowing. He would just sit on the front porch and laugh and joke with them as they did his work. Genius. Ron's parents, it says, struggled financially, but the family had the gospel. Elder Rasband said, "We never had a lot of money, but it never affected my happiness," which I think that's just so incredible to hear. So good for any of us out there who it's like, oh my gosh, are our kids struggling? Are they going to feel like they have the worst life ever? And you can look at Elder Rasband and be like, no, clearly. Really cool. It says that his stake president for 14 years as he was growing up was James E. Faust, and was referred to, Elder Rasband was, as one of President Faust's Cottonwood boys, and because he helped raise him. So that's also very significant. And then I'm just scrolling through here. He met his sweet wife Melanie. They met at the University of Utah. And really little cool sub-thought is Melanie came from an active Latter-day Saint family. Her father was a career military officer, and her mother never let the family's frequent moves become an excuse for missing church. And I really wanted to point that out because it sounds like both Elder Rasband and Sister Rasband had very, very strong moms in the sense of no matter if their husband, the father, was not home, was working, providing for the family, the mothers then took over making sure everything else was cared for, especially the gospel upbringing and teaching of their kids. And I just want to point that out because obviously we're going to be talking about that in Elder Rasband's talk today. So I just thought it was very, very interesting. Then there's this cute photo of Elder Rasband and Sister Rasband getting married, and he is wearing some crazy green striped pants. And I want to talk about, while he was serving as Elders Quorum president in his new married student ward, Ron became acquainted with one only John Huntsman Sr., who was the ward's high council advisor. Just saying. This is what I've realized, y'all. We always talk about, especially in the business world, networking is a huge, huge thing, especially in today's world. No more are you just handing in resumes and hoping, crossing your fingers, you get called. It's all about networking and whatever you want to do in business. Why have we forgotten the beauty? And I don't want to say this as like, I'm not trying to downplay at all the beauty of the gospel, the beauty of how church is set up, but also a blessing. Like, we have so many incredible people in our wards, in our stakes. That's another reason we should be doing our ministering. That's another reason we should be accepting callings. We get to network within our own pool of people. Just a thought. And I'm pretty sure it was in here. Like, this just goes to show the influence that people can have on your life. And again, it's just another blessing that is church. And I think we sometimes forget that too. Again, I'm not trying to say like we're just going to church to see what we can get out of it. No. Please do not hear that. But just another blessing. Like, there are incredible people all around us who can help us and lift us and push us to do better in ways that we never imagined. And that's what it is. In Elder Rasband's bio, he talks about how growing up, most of his life is shaped around ward activities, ward sports, ward game nights, scouting activities. And that's how he has made lifelong friends, but also these incredible relationships that have helped him later on in his life. So again, just another thought, another push, like becoming and very active in your ward and participating with those around you. Okay, going down to their sweet family. They have 4 daughters, and then they got son right at the end. And I love this, that his kids were talking about whether shooting a basketball with their son, playing a board game with his daughters, or fishing with the whole family. Ron, Elder Rasband, loves to win. One of his sons says, while we were growing up, he would never let anyone win. We had to earn it, but it made us better, and the tradition continues with his loving grandchildren. I love this because, y'all, this is Britton's philosophy, because that was his dad's philosophy. And because of that, when him and his dad would play basketball, like, it made Britton better. And so now he's like, I have to make sure that our kids learn to earn everything around them. And it really does. I mean, when you truly win at like a sporting event or a competition, it does something with you. So I loved that they pointed this out. But I also love they said his kids that they couldn't help but notice how ministering and church leadership magnified our dad's ability to show love and compassion, to express feelings of the Spirit, and to inspire others to do their best, which is so great because I think the world today labels us taking callings as, what is it even worth? And it's taking your time away from things that matter, when just as his kids who have watched their dad go through so much show, no, actually it's helped our dad gain so much more. And this was the final part that I thought was so cute. His son said, those of us who know him best raised our hands the highest when he was sustained as an apostle. So you have to go back and read the whole biography. It's incredible. And I feel so endeared to Elder Rasband because I had just got off my mission and was at, where were we? We were at Temple Square, but we were in between. It wasn't the session we were going to. So I was with a couple of girls from the mission, and we were able to sustain him, Elder Stevenson, and Elder Renlin as new apostles. I just remember that. So those 3 have a special place in my heart. But that special place grows a little bit bigger after we go through this talk. And what we're going to do today, it's a little different. Instead of going through my exact thought process, what I'm going to do, we're going to have a little reading time. I'm going to read the things that stuck out to me most in my study. And then we'll kind of start off there with the highlighted parts. But then I researched some things, and I'm going to go over the exact research I received, then go back to the end of what I highlighted in the talk. So just as I said before, I kind of got off on a sub-thought. Well, I'll read what I read before we got there. Then I'll get the research, then we'll go back to, because it really feels like the rest of the talk, after we go through this part that I researched, it almost hits a little bit more after it. So I felt the Spirit really strong during this talk. And I really, really hope that there's something in here that you need to hear. A warning, a clarification, an answer to a prayer, all of it. It's so good. So here we go. The Family Proclamation to the world was created to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society. This proclamation, as Elder Rasband was told, is now yours. Your name, pointing to the words Council of the 12 Apostles in the title, is right here. Fill it and teach it like you own it. Remember, brothers and sisters, as I said in a previous general conference from this very pulpit, words matter. In 1994, a year before the proclamation was presented, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles discussed how society and governments were pulling away from God's laws for marriage, family, and gender. During that year, these apostles, seers called of God, prepared a declaration about the family. They prayerfully turned to the Lord for what they should say and how they should say it. The sisters, speaking of the Relief Society General Presidency, like the apostles, had been weighing concerns about women and families. President Elaine Jack later explained, "We didn't know what the proclamation on the family was at the time. We could tell by the title, but we felt anything on the family would be a positive thing. I felt very positive that we had members of the Quorum of the 12 that were receiving revelation." The Relief Society meeting that Sunday was historic. President Hinckley introduced the Family Proclamation with these important words. With so much of sophistry that is passed off as truth, with so much of deception concerning standards and values, with so much of allurement and enticement to take on the slow stain of the world, we have felt to warn and forewarn of standards, doctrines, and practices relative to the family, which the prophets, seers, and revelators of this church have repeatedly stated throughout its history. So now we're going to jump over to a conversation that Chat and I had. The question I asked was, at the time, or I think I just went through, it was back a couple things, when in 1994, a year before the proclamation was presented, Elder Rasband stated that the Quorum of the 12 Apostles discussed how society and governments were pulling away from God's laws for family, marriage, and gender. That is then when I put in chat, what was being seen, at least on a worldly scale, of those three things. So number one being marriage was being legally redefined. Same-sex marriage entered public law debates for the first time. By 1994 to 1995, governments were openly debating whether marriage was a divinely rooted institution or a flexible legal contract that could be redefined by courts. Number two, gender roles were being reframed as social constructs. During this period, academic and political language increasingly treated gender as socially constructed, not biologically grounded. While the church fully supports women's dignity and equality, it strongly disagreed with the idea that men and women are interchangeable and biological sex has no eternal or spiritual significance. I've got a lot of papers, y'all, so be ready for that. Number three, divorce, cohabitation, and non-marital childbearing surged. Government policy increasingly treated single-parent households, cohabitating couples, blended families as functionally equivalent to married families. Number 4, international pressure through UN conferences. This part is often overlooked, but very important. In 1994, a UN conference on population and development in Cairo, and in 1995, a UN World Conference on Women in Beijing. These conferences promoted reproductive autonomy, expanded definitions of family, language that minimized traditional marriage, and de-emphasized parental authority in favor of state or international norms. Church leaders were deeply concerned that international law and policy were beginning to override religious and parental authority, redefine family in ways disconnected from God. The proclamation was, in part, a global statement, not just an American one. Number 5, religion was being pushed out of public moral authority. Culturally, the early 1990s marked increasing secularization, you know what I'm saying, skepticism toward religious influence and law, framing religious beliefs as private opinions rather than moral truths. For the church, this raised a serious concern. If God is excluded from defining families, then governments, not divine law, become the final authority. The proclamation explicitly asserts that marriage and family are ordained of God. Moral accountability exists before Him, not just the state. I then went on to ask and say, I want to expound and get more info on these thoughts that stuck out to me. Framing religious beliefs as private opinions rather than moral truths. Family structure being treated as morally neutral. And more about international law and policy, what worried leaders there. So first off, religious beliefs reframed as private opinions, not moral truths. Religion was seen, especially in Western societies, as a source of moral truth, something that legitimately shaped law, culture, and public norms. But by the late 20th century, the assumption changed. A new framework took hold. I feel like my mouth is getting dry and I'm not being able to talk. Religion is acceptable only as a personal lifestyle choice, not as a source of public moral authority. This meant you can believe something religiously, but you cannot claim it should influence law, education, or social standards. How this played out practically. Religious arguments began to be dismissed as faith-based versus rational, subjective, or they imposed morality. So instead of asking, is this morally true, society increasingly asked, does this restrict individual autonomy? This shift matters because moral truth was replaced with personal preference. The proclamation pushes directly against this by stating things like marriage between a man and woman is ordained of God, gender is an essential characteristic, parents have a solemn responsibility. Those are not framed as opinions. They are framed as objective divine realities. That was intentional. Family structure treated as morally neutral. What morally neutral actually means. This does not mean governments hated families. It means no family structure was considered inherently better than another. Outcomes mattered more than form. Stability and happiness replaced moral design. So in policy terms, married parents, cohabitating parents, single parents, blended families, the structure itself was irrelevant as long as basic needs are being met. From a secular lens, this seems compassionate and inclusive. From a religious lens, it is radical. Why? Because it removes the idea that there is a divinely intended order. The children have a right to a mother and a father. Marriage is not just emotional, but covenantal. The proclamation explicitly rejects neutrality by saying children are entitled to birth within the bonds of matrimony. That is a moral claim, not a sociological one. Why can't I say words today? Why church leaders were alarmed. If family structure is morally neutral, then there's no reason to encourage marriage. There's no reason to privilege mother-father households, and there's no reason to teach distinct parental roles. And once neutrality is accepted, any critique becomes discrimination. Any standard becomes judgment. Hope you heard that. The church saw neutrality as not neutral at all, but as actively eroding divine patterns. Number 3, international law and policy. Why this deeply concerned church leaders. This is the least understood, but arguably the most important piece. Why international conferences mattered. By the 1990s, international bodies, especially the UN, had growing influence over national laws, education standards, family policy, reproductive rights, child welfare frameworks. Language introduced at these conferences often became treaty language, funding requirements, legal precedent. So, words mattered immensely. I'm just going to say that again. Words mattered immensely. Moving on. The 1994 Cairo Conference. Key concerns included emphasis on individual reproductive autonomy, language that weakened parental authority, framing fertility and childbearing as matters of personal choice, not moral responsibility, broad, ambiguous definitions of family. From the church's perspective, children were increasingly framed as products of choice, parents as negotiable caregivers, and the state as the ultimate authority over outcomes. In 1995, at the Beijing Conference for Women, while advocating important protections for women, the conference also blurred distinctions between sex and gender, treated motherhood as a social role, not a divine calling, promoted language that disconnected women's identity from family life, and framed traditional family roles as sources of oppression. The concern was not women's empowerment. It was that family itself was being treated as optional or even suspect. Why this alarmed church leaders? International law works top down. Once these ideas are embedded, nations feel pressure to conform. Religious exemptions shrink. Parental rights can be overridden, and dissent is reframed as harmful. Church leaders foresaw a future where religious teachings on family could be labeled discriminatory. Parents could lose moral authority over children's formation, and governments, not God, define marriage and gender. How all these three threads connect. Put together, these shifts create a new moral system, the old framework versus the new framework. One of those older frameworks could be moral truth is objective, while the new one is truth is personal. Family is divinely ordered. Family is self-defined. Religion informs public life. Religion is private. Parents answer to God. Parents answer to the state. Gender is eternal. Gender is mutable. My last thought on this. I asked chat, if you were to look at this from the adversary's perspective, why would he hit so hard at the women? I'm hoping you guys connected the dots there. It brought up the 1995 Women's Conference in Beijing, and the proclamation was given to the church, to the body of the church in 1995 at our women's conference. If we step into the adversary's perspective, the focus on women is not incidental at all. It is strategic. From the adversary's perspective, women are the keystone. In the plan of salvation, women are not peripheral. They are structural. Tell me why that one hit so hard right now. From a gospel worldview, women uniquely bring life into the world. They shape early identity, attachment, and moral formation, transmit culture, faith, and values across generations, and they anchor the emotional and spiritual climate of the home. If you want to disrupt families, faith continuity, generational discipleship, covenant culture, you don't start with men. You start with women. Not because women are weak, but because they are pivotal. Break the keystone and the arch collapses on its own. Why attack women specifically, not just family in general? Because women carry creation power. Scriptures consistently show that Satan cannot create, that he can only distort, counterfeit, or destroy creation. Women's bodies, identities, and callings are intimately tied to creation, physical and spiritual. So the adversary's strategy becomes detach women from the sacred meaning of their bodies. Redefine creation power as accidental, burdensome, or oppressive. Separate sex from covenant. Separate motherhood from purpose. Notice the pattern. Fertility becomes a problem to manage. Pregnancy becomes a threat to autonomy. Motherhood becomes a loss of self. Dependency becomes weakness. From the adversary's view, if women see their life-giving role as optional, interchangeable, irrelevant, or shameful, then creation itself is desacralized. Because women are natural covenant transmitters, women disproportionately, and in case you need a definition on that word, disproportionately means to an extent that is too large or too small in comparison with something else. We're going to say it's too large. Women disproportionately teach children to pray, model emotional regulation, maintain kinship ties, preserve traditions, and create the daily rhythms of home life. Satan does not need women to reject God outright. He only needs them to believe this doesn't matter that much. If women become chronically overwhelmed, ashamed of desiring home-centered lives, convinced that devotion is regression, or fragmented between incompatible expectations, then covenant life slowly withers without open rebellion. Why the 1995 Beijing Women's Conference mattered. From a purely secular lens, Beijing was about women's rights. From a spiritual adversarial lens, it was about redefining womanhood itself. Key spiritual consequences of Beijing-era ideology: womanhood detached from motherhood, gender severed from embodiment, caregiving reframed as unpaid labor rather than sacred work, male-female complementarity, wow, there are so many big words in this, treated as power imbalance, autonomy elevated above relational responsibility. Some goals might have been good and necessary, but the adversary doesn't work in absolutes. He works in misdirection. Why the proclamation was read as at a women's conference. Women needed to hear it first. Church leaders were not primarily talking about women. They were talking to women. Because if the adversary's pressure point is women's identity, then women needed clarity before confusion hardened. Affirmation before shame narratives took root, and doctrine before ideology filled the gap. The proclamation does something radical for women. It says, your role is essential, not optional. Your body is eternal, not incidental. Your influence is divinely ordained, not culturally assigned. Your work in the home is equal in value, not subordinate. That message had to land in women's hearts first. Although this was a spiritual counter-declaration from an adversarial perspective, Beijing said, womanhood is what you define it to be. The proclamation said, womanhood is something God defined before the world was. Reading it at a women's conference was a line drawn, not politically, but spiritually. There's a scriptural pattern that the adversary always targets women at covenant turning points. This is not new. There's Eve, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Mary, and any early Christian women, but especially if we look at Eve, Eve was attacked not because she was weak, but because she was discerning and central to the plan. Whenever God is about to establish covenant, bring forth life, preserve truth across generations, women are pressured hardest. A quiet, more modern adversarial tactic in our era, the adversary doesn't usually say, reject motherhood. He says, you can't afford to care. You'll lose yourself. This isn't enough. You should be more. You're failing everywhere. That internal fragmentation is incredibly effective. A woman divided against herself is too exhausted to build anything enduring. Final thought on this. If the adversary were drawing a battle map, women wouldn't be collateral damage. They would be primary ground. If God were issuing a counter statement at a pivotal moment in history, it would make sense that he would speak clearly, speak early, and speak directly to women first. We're going to jump back over now to the remainder of Elder Rasband's talk. When presented, the proclamation did not align with the views of many in the world. Not then, not now. The principles are not out of step, but perfectly in step with the ways of the Lord and his covenant path. For those with concerns, know that no one knows you better or cares more deeply about you than he does. Turn to him, pour out your heart to him, trust him and his promises. Stay with us. You live in challenging times when the adversary seeks to make you his. Do not be drawn off. And if you are, come back. Happiness in family life is most likely to be achieved when founded upon the teachings of Jesus Christ. Do the very best you can. Preside does not mean dominate, and nurture does not mean a secondary role. Our Father in heaven has provided the proclamation on the family to help guide us home to him, to help us learn and be filled with love, strength, purpose, and eternal understanding. With all my soul, I plead with you to live close to him and his beloved Son. I promise as you do so, the Spirit will inspire and guide you and help you fill in your heart their promised peace that passeth all understanding. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.